Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? It is May 21st, 2025, 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to, if everyone can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Okay. Do we want to go ahead and move forward with approval for the minutes of last?
So moved.
Yeah, I got one thing on the minutes, though. On page 5, the public hearing was then closed. And then it has a line starting with my name on it. I don't think that was me. I looked at the video and I didn't speak anything after the public hearing was closed.
Yeah, it looks like that may have been a stray
Yeah, gotcha.
thing so we can remove that from.
Perfect. With that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So passed. Okay, moving on. Do we have any public comment?
Oh, one moment. I think we need to do roll call.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. Go ahead, Maria.
Chair Chester,
Present.
Vice Chair Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Hicks, Commissioner McHouston,
Here.
Commissioner Mild,
Here.
Commissioner Mullins,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Here.
and correction, that was Chair Phillips.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, to item number 1. So we will open the public hearing. Do we have any disclosure of ex parte communication? All right, staff presentation.
Oh, for item number 2, correct?
For item number 2, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. I bring before you today item number 2, case number PLN PHE 24-0002, a special use permit for the architectural review of an existing unpermitted 21.5-foot tall and 2,500 square foot steel accessory structure associated with the existing residence and proposed second 24.3-foot tall residence on a single-family residential property located at 10922 Bryant Street, APN 0303-05167. The metal structure is partially constructed on a 1.58-acre corner parcel located southwest of Fir Avenue and Bryant Street in single residential zoning. There is a mobile home community to the north, Garden Works Educational Center to the south, and residences surrounding the site. The property is currently improved with a 1-story, 16.4-foot tall residence on site. To meet the required SUP findings for the 21.5-foot tall metal structure, there is a second 24.3-foot tall second home proposed through a concurrent LUCR submittal. For new planning commissioners, LUCR just an administrative entitlement. This second taller home shall be finalized prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the metal structure to ensure that the accessory structure is subordinate in size, location, and appearance to the primary residential unit. So construction was paused on this metal structure until the necessary permitting was obtained. It should also be noted that the San Bernardino County Assessor's parcel map indicated that the city's right-of-way and applicant's property line were within the structure's footprint. I guess you can kind of see that. All right, right up here. However, the applicant's land surveyor determined that the legal description correctly identified the property boundaries as 22 feet north of the structure, so planning staff is working to reconcile those differences between the county's assessor legal parcel information and the city's GIS map in the future. So there's going to be additional work done to finalize these corrections. The structure adheres to all minimum setback requirements and access is provided through Bryan Street. The structure will be screened by existing fencing and vegetation from Fir Avenue, as the structure is 22 feet away from Fir Avenue along the northern property line. All right, so the steel accessory structure will feature a gable roof and will be enclosed on all 4 sides. The structure has 15 feet of vertical clearance, but pitches towards the center with a peak height of about 21 feet and 6 inches. The exterior elevations include Sea Wolf painted horizontal rib steel panels, and the extended gable roof consists of ivory with cocoa brown trim painted steel panels. The applicant has also installed vegetation and fencing to provide screening. So here are some site photos. You can see the existing primary residences right here, the existing partially constructed metal structures right here. This is a view from Fir Avenue. And again, it will be fully enclosed once the building permit is issued. Notices of the project were sent to all surrounding contiguous property owners and no comments were received. So it is staff's recommendation that you review the architectural design of the structure, adopt the special use permit findings, direct staff to adopt a categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA, and direct staff to file a notice of exemption. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. The applicant is here to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to come up and speak?
No, I mean, I'm just here to see what's gonna be the decision.
I did a little note to speak. I represent the residents around the. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Okay. Any public comment?
Yes, we received one slip. Donna Solomon.
Do I come up now? Okay. Sorry, I haven't been in a planning meeting in a long time. Okay. My name's Donna Solomon. I'm the owner of Garden Works for Kids that is adjacent to the property. The Guerreros purchased the property almost 2 years ago, and we've partnered with them to go ahead and kind of bring the garden and his project to fruition. He comes from a different city and is excited about coming to Yucaipa, has a construction business, and is going to relocate, and this is going to be his home. So it's bringing positive impact. He has been a supporter of the garden and has done projects on with us, and we and all the residents around the property are real happy with the improvements made and the way that it was done tastefully, so that it blends into what we are doing. Garden Works for Kids is a children's learning garden, and it sort of brings that hometown farm feel. And we feel with the Guerreros being able to store their materials inside a building, it would really be an asset to us because it'll add to what we already have. The vegetation is going to grow and fill in that area and fit into what our design is, which is an area that kids can enjoy, and also, kind of like the hometown feeling too. When his home goes in it, it will fit in with the residential homes that are already there. The neighbors embrace him and are excited about having another resident there. And just wanted to, this is his dream and our dream, that being a partner like this, the garden will continue and be strong. And then also he'll be able to grow his business here and be an asset to the community too. So that's our take on that it's just not, being used just as a storage ground, but as a kind of a communal area for all of us to use and enjoy. If we don't get this permit, that means that he will have to take over the garden, the barn that's existing there, and then we'll have to close Garden Works. So we don't want that to happen, and we want him, to be part of our corner, as they say, and watch his business grow just like mine did from the ground up. So that's my feelings on that. So thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you so much. All right, with that, the public hearing is closed, and we're going to turn to the commissioners for discussion. Does anybody have anything, any question?
Chairman Phillips, did we get to disclosure of any ex parte communications?
I think we did that, did we say that? I did ask that in the beginning, yes.
All right, thank you.
Did anybody have any ex parte? Okay, with that, public hearing is closed and open for commissioner discussion. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask or any questions? Any input?
I'll make a motion to approve case number PLN-PHE 24-0002. And then do we also prescribe the other case number as well?
Sorry, say that again?
Okay, I read the case number at the top, and then how about PLN-ADM 25-003?
No, you don't need to do that one. That one is a separate administrative permit, but we
Okay,
provided
but
that
I,
in
but I
reference.
didn't know if we had to include that. So, I make a motion.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Moving on to subject 3.
And before we start, I did want, since it was asked, just for the ex parte communications, just a quick note from the Assistant City Attorney of what that entails, just for everyone's reference as we kind of proceed on, since that was asked of me.
Yes, when it comes to ex parte disclosure of ex parte communications, the purpose is to determine if any of the commissioners has received any evidence or information outside of this hearing, which may create any bias or affect your ability to decide the merits of any item solely based on the information and evidence presented at the hearing. So that's the purpose, is to ferret out any potential sources of bias. So, just being familiar with a project or having an opinion beforehand, that's not bias. But we're talking about, information that goes beyond just being merely familiar, and which could affect your ability to make an unbiased decision. Because every applicant is entitled to a fair hearing and to have unbiased decision makers. So that is the purpose of the disclosure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
I have a couple questions for that. Ex parte communication, let's say I have a couple of members of the public come to me and said, hey, I see this item on the agenda and I have some thoughts. Okay, so I listen to their thoughts. Is that a disclosure item?
I think out of abundance of caution, that may be appropriate, although it may also depend on the effect on your ability to make a decision in the case. For example, if you're in communications with members of the public and it gets to the point where you may become an advocate, for example, or attempt to sway public opinion, that goes beyond just me being given information, just having a chat. That could possibly indicate bias or affect your ability to make a decision solely based on the information presented at the hearing. So if you have any doubts, we are always happy to help. And, if you contact, Ben or I or Stephen, we'll be happy to take a look at any particular instance that you may be thinking of.
So what you're saying is my own personal opinion, if I think that I could have been swayed by somebody, if I felt somebody was making some comments to me, okay, and maybe spoke very strongly about one way or another on an item, But if I felt I could make a decision without, that I could make an unbiased decision, then it's not necessary to disclose.
I think disclosure in this instance is still a good idea. But the fact that you may continue participating in the hearing, it's an indication that you can still make a decision in an unbiased manner.
Okay, if you have a, in the way I've understood it in the past, if you had a member of the public or somebody else there that had a financial interest or of some form of ownership interest or representation interest, that would definitely be a disclosure item.
Yes, that would be a conflict of interest.
Okay, but if I was at, say, a swim party, okay, and a couple of people were talking about a project, and we're discussing some items in vague, in a vague discussion about that, is that a disclosure item?
It's a little hard to determine based on just hypotheticals. I think it would depend on the particular situation, and we're always happy to help you sort them out if you contact city staff beforehand.
So what you're saying is it's my personal opinion if I felt it was an item that needed to be disclosed based on what was discussed or commented about.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we are going to move on to item number 3 in the agenda. And we are going to open the public hearing for subject with Ida and Larry Keepers, case number PLN PHE 250007, and time for staff presentation.
Thanks again, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. I bring before you today item number 3, case number PLN PHE 250007, a special use permit for the architectural review of a 612 square foot Alumawood patio cover addition to an existing detached 1,190 square foot accessory dwelling unit on a single residential property at 13469 Douglas Street. So the project is on a 0.68 acre interior parcel located southwest of Douglas Street and Avenue H in single residential zoning, surrounded by residences and permitted RV storage. There is an existing 2,122 square foot residence and 1,190 square foot ADU on the property. This is a proposed patio addition to the ADU that exceeds the size thresholds identified in Development Code Section 84.0570. This requires a special use permit as an ADU can only exceed 1,200 square feet to provide 400 square foot of enclosed parking and 250 square feet of architectural features like a patio. So sometimes staff can work with applicants to ensure that the overall footprint is less than these thresholds. However, the applicant elected to pursue the special use permit process instead of reducing the project square footage. The structure adheres to all minimum setback requirements and access is provided through Douglas Street. The structure would not be visible from Douglas Street as the structure would be over 165 feet from the street in the rear of the property and will be partially shielded from view with the existing fencing. So the attached patio will feature a slanted roof and be open on 3 sides. The peak height of the proposed patio will be 12 feet and 3 inches, and the new covered porch shall be constructed of Alumawood. It's a common aluminum material that is embossed, painted, and manufactured to resemble cedar wood grain for compatibility with residential homes. The entirety of the structure shall be painted to match the existing ADU's white trim and additional detailing to enhance the design of the ADU. So here are some site photos. This is the ADU in question. The patio is going to go right here at the front. And this is the existing primary residence over here. As a part of the project notices were sent to surrounding property owners and no comments were received. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that you review the architectural design of the structure, adopt the special use permit findings, direct staff to adopt a categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA, and direct staff to file a notice of exemption. And the applicant is also here to answer any questions if needed.
Wonderful, thank you. Would the applicant like to come up?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm the applicant. The owners are not here today. This is a very simple, basic project, as Katie mentioned, just because of the size of the patio cover was the only reason why it had to go before Planning Commission. So the property owners are looking forward to be able to put their patio cover on the ADU.
Wonderful, thank you so much. All right, do we have any public comment?
No public comments on this item.
Okay, with that, the public hearing is closed. We're going to move to the commissioners. Does anybody have any comment or concerns?
I'll make a motion to approve case number PLN-PHE-25-0007.
And I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passed. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item number 4, which is a discussion item, staff presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So Landon Kern, our assistant city engineer, will be providing the presentation on our capital improvement program. This is a essentially the ongoing kind of list of projects that the city undertakes every year. And so as part of the annual budget that we include for the city council adoption includes the funding for the capital improvement program. And so as prior to the official adoption of the budget, the Planning Commission weighs in on those kind of projects and make sure that they're consistent with the general plan. So the activities that we're proposing, especially as part of the public works initiatives, are generally following what the general plan calls out for. And so Landon will provide a presentation on those, and I'll let you take it from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben, and good evening, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. Happy to be here tonight to walk you through our capital improvement program for this, that's a part of this next budget cycle here. It'll be kind of a high-level presentation, not too much detail on all of our capital improvement projects, a little more of a focus on kind of the overall CIP itself, kind of how it makes up the CIP, the funding sources, and getting a little bit more detail for you on a few of the new projects that we're introducing. Kind of starting off a little bit high level here. I'm sure many of you are probably already familiar about some of this information, but the capital improvement program is a multi-year plan that outlines the city's planned investments in infrastructure and public facilities. The City Council provides direction over the years through the budget cycle on how to prioritize the city's projects. Staff prepares the draft CIP for City Council each year, kind of on the very front end of the budget adoption and budget evaluation process. And so the draft CIP that you'll be going over with me tonight through this presentation was approved by Council with the draft budget just recently here on May 12th. And that is every year incorporated into the annual budget process. And as Ben mentioned, this evening's item is really a little bit more focused on determining and confirming conformance with the projects in the CIP with the general plan. I think perhaps the most obvious element of the general plan that we can see and kind of correlate with the CIP is the circulation element and the transportation and traffic projects that we have that you'll see as we walk through the presentation here. I'll just start out and show you a couple slides here. This slide is a pie chart that shows the various funding sources that make up the capital improvement program. This is over a 20-year time period, so you can see that you're getting close to about $200 million of investments that the city has put into the capital improvement program. This is the same slide here with just a focus on the bottom. Those bottom three blue, tan, and purple pieces of the pie there represent about 47% of that $193 million we're seeing here. Those funding sources are either federal or state grants or agency partnerships with different agencies that have contributed toward projects in the past. So a pretty significant portion of the CIP from the financial, revenue side is directly related to these grants. The city's been really aggressive and successful in pursuing grants to fund a lot of our infrastructure projects, and that's what we're seeing here on this slide. You can just a note. You can see that general fund makes up a very small portion of our capital improvement program funding sources, and about 25% up here we have these dedicated revenue sources that are restricted and really dedicated primarily for use for maintenance, usually with the pavement and different facilities maintained by the city on a regular basis. So that just kind of shows you the big picture of what makes up the capital improvement program. The attachment with the report is a little bit dry, not too exciting, not a lot to look at there. A lot of the information on that attachment is really more related to the different funding revenues that make up the authorized budget that we have to spend on these projects. And what you'll see in that note is that the CIP is organized into different categories. So from the finance perspective, these revenues, as they come into the city, they end up in different funds. And so these different categories, the different sheets that you'll see, and we'll walk through that in a moment, that is essentially where each of these projects live in that fund. And so the funding that's used to pay for the construction or design or environmental phases of the projects are really coming out of that fund as those revenues come in. So you'll see that as we go through, that the CIP is kind of structured and organized in categories, primarily based on where that revenue ends up and how that budget is authorized through that process. And so I'll just kind of highlight for you. We'll walk through each of these categories. I have a bulleted list of the projects that we're seeing on here with just kind of the financial information stripped down. That financial data is in the attachment itself. And so starting off with our first category, our street maintenance, also known as our pavement management program in the engineering division. We commonly refer to that as the PMP. So if you hear me say PMP, that's our pavement management program. And this includes our annual list of projects and programs focused on maintenance of pavement within the city. That includes primarily a significant part of the $3.7 million that is budgeted with this coming fiscal year. A significant portion of that is dedicated toward repaving the existing streets that we have with different methods based on the condition of those streets, resurfacing, striping, concrete replacement for sidewalks, and there's some other programs that are housed within the PMP that this includes as well. Just a quick overview on that. Drainage facilities, really important category for the city of Yucaipa. We're situated right up here in the foothills, and we're subject to a little bit more intense rain than some of our neighboring cities. And of course, we've seen over the past few years with some of the fires that we've had a little bit more attention on this category with respect to emergency preparedness and response. And so these projects that we're seeing here are some of those drainage facilities that are in various phases. I should mention that as we go through these categories, there's a lot to each of these projects, a lot of history, a lot of background, a lot of planning and environmental review and construction that goes into this. And so these projects that we'll be walking through that are in the CIP are all in different phases. We won't go through each of them, but we can certainly highlight a few. If you have questions, I'll have a little bit more time at the end if we want to engage in some more questions about each of these projects. I'll take us to the next category here, traffic facilities. We have seven projects in our traffic facilities category. Some of them are a little bit longer range, like that top one there, the Wildwood Canyon Road I-10 freeway interchange. That's one example of a traffic facility project that we've been talking a little bit more about with some of our other larger efforts with the freeway corridor specific plan as an example that has always been a part of the city, in fact, the county's original general plan, the existing freeway corridor specific plan, as well as the update that's underway and in process now. That would be a new connection to the freeway there at I-10 near the Wildwood Canyon Road, Calamasa Boulevard intersection. So just one example of a project there on this list that's kind of a long-term project. And of course, you probably recognize some of these other projects that have phases that are associated with each of these. I think that's another important element to mention here with the presentation tonight. These projects that we see oftentimes have multiple phases, and sometimes the different funding sources are dedicated to completing a specific phase, a specific segment of a street. One example of that might be the County Line Road corridor project that we partnered with Calamasa on. There was grant funding focused on the intersection improvements and a pretty large section of that corridor, and then other funding sources that you'll see within that category make up the funding for a different segment within that. Next are public facilities. As you may have noticed, our previous location for our public works yard, our city yard, was relocated to accommodate the construction in the Oak Glen Creek specific plan area, those new homes that we saw at the corner of Oak Glen Road and 2nd Street. And that relocated city yard relocation project, it lives within our public facilities category of the CIP. And that project, I'm happy to report, is really wrapping up. The landscaping contract just completed. So that was one of the final phases of that project as an example there. Next here we have our park facilities category. So you'll see various city parks with some of the projects that we have on the docket there. As I mentioned, in various phases. Some of these projects that are you'll see on this on the CIP are actually nearing or already complete, and there are times where we leave a project on these lists. One example would be if there's grant funding that we're working with our partners on to get those monies reimbursed, we leave this project open for some time. So some of these projects that you notice or might be familiar with may be near or even recently completed as we go through this. So just a note there. Park Capital Replacement Fund, this covers a few other of our public facilities and some of those replacement projects that we've seen over the years, like the BMX park with the utilities that were completed, and the recent renovation of the community center restroom. Our air quality improvement category comes with specific funding to essentially help with construction of street improvement projects that help with multimodal transportation. So you'll see 2 projects in that category there. Next, our low water crossing replacement category, essentially replacing some of those dips in the road. There's different nicknames for those: Arizona dip crossings, Irish causeways. A lot of those dips over the years have gone away, and we've replaced those with bridges or culverts. Most of these projects, all of these projects are living or funded with Highway Bridge Program funding through FHWA and Caltrans. And so typically these projects are funded with the Highway Bridge Program funds. We've got the Fremont Street Bridge recently completed several years back with the ongoing mitigation there, and the 2 remaining bridge projects in that fund that remain to be completed. Next is the CDBG category, the Community Development Block Grant. That is a specific grant program that is eligible projects within certain areas within the city. We can apply for funding to improve that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the 3rd bullet point there, the Community Park ADA Trail improvements. That is one of our new projects that is being proposed with the CIP this year with the grant that we got awarded through the CDBG program. Next is our miscellaneous capital projects. Those first 2 bullet points are a little bit heavier in Ben's category as we've been working through over the years with those specific plans. I think important to make a note here that our CIP we not only look to make sure and on the staff level and through city council and at these presentations to make sure that these projects are consistent with the general plan, but if there's a specific plan in play, we certainly evaluate whether or not these capital improvement program projects are consistent with those specific plans as well. The Wildwood Canyon Road interchange that's proposed is a good example of evaluating for conformance with that freeway corridor specific plan as it exists now, and also the potential updates with those specific plans. Kind of exciting that 7th Street pickleball facility improvements are wrapping up with some resurfacing going on. So that's that last bullet point you'll see here on this category. Next, we have our general capital category. Some more miscellaneous projects here in this category. We have the recent award of some grant funding to facilitate that third bullet point is going to allow us to add the reflective yellow taping that you've seen on some of the newer traffic signals. That's a new Caltrans standard, and so we just recently received some grant funding to move forward with that project to upgrade our existing traffic signal heads so they're more visible at night. You'll probably recognize some of our newer signals are being installed with that, and this would be like a retrofit upgrade of the existing facilities there. Our fire category, we actually are going to be moving forward with that bullet point here shortly. Received bids recently on that, so excited to move forward with that project in the fire category. And then the public safety fund is technically part of our capital improvement program, and so that is really the project in that category is focused specifically on that purchase of that new fire truck. And so that was a really quick overview of many projects in our CIP. Like I mentioned, I'll have a lot of history and background, and some of them are connected to each other even. With the recommendation tonight and with our goal to just really look at the general plan and any applicable specific plans, I think the focus can be on the 3 new projects that are being proposed with this budget cycle. All of the other projects that are in the capital improvement program have been in the program for 1 or multiple years, and so they've been through this process through Planning Commission and City Council. We've had a lot of dialogue, and over the years we've even reprioritized per council's direction on some of the different projects, and so really the focus tonight for us is to kind of look a little more closely at the community park ADA trail improvements. And as I mentioned, we were successful in obtaining the CDBG funding for that, and that will allow us to take some of the existing trails at the lower end of the community park closer to the parking lot and convert those DG trails to concrete trails to reduce some maintenance and make them a little more accessible for folks utilizing that part of the park there. The second bullet there is related to Tropical Storm Hillary. As many of you probably were familiar, a section of Oakland Road became inundated with debris and mud, and after Tropical Storm Hillary happened, after the El Dorado fire at Chagall there, the creek small culvert there was clogged, and Oakland Road became a river of mud for a while. And so we've been working with Caltrans since then, and we were successful in obtaining some emergency grant funding. And this first phase of funding that we received, we're recommending incorporation into the CIP that will allow us to start designing that section of road that was damaged to reconstruct that, primarily in the shoulders, but some of the main line actually might need to be investigated further for reconstruction. So we're working through that process now. And then that third project I talked a little bit about a moment ago, that will allow us to move forward with the grant funding we obtained to go out to bid and have a contractor install that retro-reflective taping at night. One of the interesting elements of that, with that newer Caltrans standard that we're seeing, with our ability to respond and manage emergency situations, we've seen more power outages with those safety shutoffs. The vehicle code has those signals directs travelers to approach them like they're a stop sign. And so at night, when all of the lights are out, it's a little more difficult to see those signals. This reflective taping really helps those pop, brings more awareness to that signal if people aren't familiar with that area. So that's that third new project. And with that, the recommendation is for Planning Commission to confirm that the CIP it conforms with the general plan, the applicable specific plans, and all of the elements as a part of that plan. I know I went through a lot of information with a relative short time period, so I'm happy to pause here for a moment and allow for any questions, and we can engage in some discussion on the CIP. And I'm here to answer any questions. Katrina's behind me as well. She's also a really important part of this process with our engineering team and developing and working through this process and evaluating each project. And so Katrina may be available to step up and help me answer any questions, specifically with the PMP as well. She's a really, really important player in the development of the PMP these last few years. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I do have a question. For your CIP, I know it falls under like Public Works, correct? Does it go to CIP after that $75,000 threshold per CUPCA, or does it go to the $100,000?
If your question is referring to our requirement to go out to bid publicly,
correct.
The threshold for us on the engineering and capital improvement side is $5,000.
Right.
There are some cities that have gone through a different financial auditing process, and I'm not too familiar with exactly what that would take. We've looked into that. Their threshold, I believe, if they've met certain criteria, some of the larger cities like Los Angeles are able to go up to $200,000 with a more informal bid process.
With JOC or Easy IQC, different procurement processes like that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes those cities have a little bit more robust purchasing policy. We certainly have our own, and that may govern how they go out to procure different projects. For us, it's $5,000, which it doesn't take much to spend that with prevailing wage. It's one crew, maybe even a half or a full day of work. So most of our projects that we do go out with the competitive public low bid process.
Okay. Yeah, I highly recommend like the JOC program or Easy IQC. They're really great forms of procurement, and you can go up to $200,000. And with some agencies, depending on what that JOC contract is, it can go up to even $5-6 million that you can use in a certain time frame according to those contracts.
Appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
One thing I will add to that is we have over the past several years gone out with an RFP. So some of our projects in the CIP that are a little bit on the planning, engineering, design phase, we will go out with a request for qualifications and proposals. And so that's a different process to procure consultants to help us through that initial phase of design for some of these larger projects that we can't do in-house. We have also used that same mechanism to go out with on-call emergency construction contracts, which has been a really helpful tool for us to react a little bit quicker when we have emergency situations. So that doesn't typically cover our CIP projects. It is a mechanism that we've been able to use in accordance with our purchasing policies to give us a little bit more flexibility when we have an emergency situation. In the past several years, it's been more associated with some drainage concerns and some flooding. We've been able to use that list of contractors that we went to council with and have kind of on a short list and have kind of a contract set up. And then when we have a need for that work to take place, we come back with recommendations for how to fund that.
Is that like your pre-qual vendor list?
Yes, in a sense. The CIP is structured with our projects with dedicated funding that's been approved. And so when we come to council with a recommendation for an award of a contract as a result of our bidding process, the funding mechanism is typically already set up with this budget and this CIP approval.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Okay, that's all I had. Anybody else?
Okay. I served on general plan, and I think some of this was in relationship to general plan, the CIP. And one of the things that we talked about was the Crafton Hills area and affordable housing and developing that. Is that reflected in here somewhere?
I know that the Yucaipa Boulevard project in the category of traffic, so let me back up to that category so we can have that in front of us. So in the traffic facilities category, that Yucaipa Boulevard, 15th Street to I-10 freeway, that includes the section of Yucaipa Boulevard between 15th and the freeway. And phase 2 was constructed, I think it was completed and accepted by council in 2019. So that was the realignment of that section between 15th and 16th Street, the installation of the new traffic signal at 16th Street. And that's that area where Tennessee no longer connects to the boulevard. So we did look at the general plan there for consistency with the Crafton Hills and some of the anticipated development that's taking place in that area. Anything else you think of?
So right now, there isn't necessarily any capital improvement projects specific to the College Village overlay district. However, last year, the city council did form a enhanced infrastructure financing district that included the freeway corridor, the Oakland Road corridor, and then the College Village. And so that is to help generate future funding or additional funding source for infrastructure projects in those areas. And so I think as that tax increment kind of component comes to fruition or starts to mature, then and as a project kind of comes forward, we may see that area get prioritized in a future capital improvement cycle. But right now, there's nothing specific to that area other than it was part of the 15th to I-10, and the area directly in front of that College Village was the first phase of that was done a number of years ago, and then the second phase is down by the freeway.
I just brought it up because we anticipated, affordable housing from the state would be an issue, and with foresight, we felt Crafton was like a primary location, and we've been, 9 years, and maybe we got a little bit going there, but I don't know how the rest of the commissioners feel, but it seems to me in compliance with general plan, maybe this becomes a higher priority to infrastructure is one of the things that we're hearing is preventative from developers, coming in to develop a project. And so whatever we can do to help infrastructure move that thing along, I think we satisfy a lot of needs. That's my feeling anyway.
Yeah, there's been some contacts as well. So the College Village, by and large, is kind of separated horizontally by two different property ownerships. And to make that kind of development work pretty well is the participation between both. And so I think as of late, there's been a lot more, collaboration between the two property owners. And so hopefully we'll see more movement. There's been discussions and interest between the two, but as they kind of talk to one, they're not able to get the other one kind of on board at the same time. And so one of the challenges with a lot of the kind of planning projects is timing is everything, and sometimes the people that need to be in the room aren't necessarily ready to be there. And so, but hopefully we're seeing more positive outcomes to see the area come to fruition, as it was definitely a big priority in the 2016 general plan, since it was its own separate section of in the land use element.
All right. The other thing, I've got a couple, if I don't want to dominate here, but on general plan, another thing that we took a look at was some of our mobile home parks that have been at risk that the police department could identify that need to be incentivized to perhaps sell. And I don't know if that comes under capital improvements or not, but is there anything in our budget that reflects increasing incentives for these parks? There's 6 or 7 of them that we identified back in 2016 that could be, maybe bought out and then developed into affordable housing there.
There's nothing in the CIP. I don't think the city would necessarily be involved in a financial participation directly into those parts. But as part of the housing element programs, one of the ordinances that we did have further kind of streamline that process in terms of the housing project review. And so that was done to help kind of make it a little bit easier. So if someone did come with a project that met those requirements, they didn't have to go through a very arduous review process on top of the already unique process of going through the relocation efforts. It was designing the project and getting that approved should be easy. Everything else has its own set of red tape that you have to go through. We can't streamline that and for its own separate reasons, but we'll at least make the housing project side a lot more clear. And so we did make those changes as part of the housing element a couple of years ago.
Thanks. Another question had to do with, can't remember the street right now, but when you take Dade and you go east and it dead ends and it runs down into a wash going north. What's that street up there? Pendleton, that's right. We're all grateful. I know, I remember Oak Glen Road, a lot of us do before it was developed, and you know, that would flood and you couldn't go down there and stuff. Well, that's really the last one I think left. Are we waiting to fix that once the wine country stuff goes in, or are we actually gonna do something about that road?
Good question. So that is in our low water crossing replacement category. That's that first bullet point there, Pendleton low water crossing.
No.
We have been working through the Caltrans environmental review design process for many years. Our typical design that we move forward with is like what we see at Fremont, the culvert and the sides of that are of course raised to meet that new grade and have that all-weather crossing. So that was the approach with Pendleton. We're kind of at the very tail end with Caltrans on that. Typically, they provide approximately 90% funding to pay for all of those improvements. Pendleton's a little bit more unique because of its situation and with the significant amount of fill that would be needed to construct that. So we're working with them closely. They're indicating to us that their percentage is significantly less, and that's a very significant, it's a very expensive project to move forward with. So we will be returning to council soon with recommendations on how to move forward with that project. So there are a few different paths that we may go down. I think we'll have to work through that process, but we have received the information from Caltrans, and we're just going to be working forward to determine what we can build there and how. There is an interesting and an important connection to the north side of Oak Glen Road with where that road connects. And so without getting into too much detail, we're still working through that process with Caltrans, and we'll be returning to council with recommendations on how to proceed based on that Caltrans determination.
Do you see that happening this year then?
Yes, this next fiscal year, yes.
Oh, cool.
Not the construction necessarily, but the coming to council for direction on that.
Awesome.
And just to note, because there is one other one left that hasn't been constructed, and that's the one down on Live Oak Canyon Road at Wildwood Creek, just south of the pumpkin patch. And so that one, we just awarded a contract at the last council meeting to initiate the next phase of design. So we'll be kicking that off and going through that Caltrans process to get that ready for construction. So just a note on that. And if I may, to your first question, Ben, appreciate all the input and the help on some of those questions. I thought it would be helpful to mention that there is a really important connection with our capital improvement program and development activity. The development we've seen along Yucaipa Boulevard, I think, is a result in part because of some of the widening that took place down closer to the freeway. And so there is an important overlap with some of the development activity that we see. And the best examples we can share, we move forward with a project and that helps stimulate that economic development because those road improvements and the infrastructure is complete and the utilities are out of the way, and there's a lot of advantages and some cost savings for developers to be incentivized to come build along that newly improved road. And the important part of that is that if a development comes in before a capital improvement program is completed, or even if it's a facility that's identified in the general plan in the Crafton Hills area or someone else, that developer will, of course, pay their development impact fees. And that was a part of that pie chart we saw as the revenue we see to help pay for some of the infrastructure impacts. The developer will be conditioned to construct those ultimate improvements. And so there is an important relationship between how development takes place, how it ties in with some of our capital improvement programs. And there are some examples in here of projects where if a developer comes in sooner, they may construct a portion of one of these CIP projects with their own funding, and that goes through our development impact fee program. So just kind of an important note to mention with your first question there.
Tony?
The one I get asked about the most, County Line Road,
Yes.
where, just looking at this, we're negative 205,000. Is that right? On the first item, 174.
Okay, good question. Yeah, so on that category for in the traffic facilities, you're looking at the column for current year additional budget request.
Yes.
The 205. So that was the result of, and this project is very complex because it's made up of multiple funding sources. And so that if you look at that line item there, the MSRC grant, that was a grant that the city was awarded for construction of a section of County Line Road between 5th and 3rd Street. There are two different segments on between Cal Mesa Boulevard and 3rd. There's a section kind of on either side of the larger 5th Street roundabout. So those improvements were completed. That is a kind of a cleanup item to clean up that grant funded portion. And so that is actually we're recommending that funding source be reduced to reflect the actual grant award and us closing that project out. If you look in the column to the left of that, it's titled Estimated Remaining Budget. Those numbers in that column represent the amount of budget that's estimated to remain after June to fund the future phases of construction.
Okay.
I did provide at a recent council meeting a construction update there. I'd be happy to give you a quick one if you'd like on where we're at, if that was the intent of your question.
I would appreciate it just because.
Okay, sure.
We get that question.
There's a lot of activity. I live off County Line Road, and so my family and my neighbors ask me regularly, so I'm very familiar with that. I'm more excited than anyone to see that all get done. The Cal Mesa and City of Yucaipa partnership with the LPP grant, you'll see an LPP grant funding, that last row. That phase of improvements that was focused on the roadway, the intersection, the roundabout improvements, that contract is wrapping up. They're working with the contractor to close that project out. We're involved with that. Those intersection and street improvements are substantially complete. There's some conduit for the street lighting and kind of a couple things that are left to clean up there. What we've been seeing more recently is all of the utility work that was primarily with South Mesa Water Company's replacement of the water line with 2 new water lines. That work is also wrapping up. I think they have a few things they're working through. The next phase of utility improvements is the San Gorgonio Pass Water Agency is going to actually use the old water line that South Mesa Water Company replaced as a gravity feeder from the DWR line in Bryant to convey water down to a proposed basin down on the south side of County Line Road behind the 7-Eleven by 3rd Street. So that's like a groundwater recharge project that another utility agency is moving forward with. Their schedule right now is they're going out to bid soon to bring a contractor on board to facilitate that. There will be some cuts in the pavement, but it's not going to be as extensive as what we saw with South Mesa's contract. And so we've been working closely with them because our plans through the pavement management program with this budget cycle, this $3.7 million we talked about with this next round of pavement rehab, we want to rehab that as soon as possible. We don't want to do it before some other utility work comes in and rips up that investment. So right now we're hearing from that agency they're going to be wrapping up in September, October timeframe, at which point we're planning to, with the PMP, go out to bid and rehab from Calamasa Boulevard to Bryant.
So the final cap is not in this portion of the budget then?
Yes, and there are some segments of the road that will need to be completely removed and reconstructed.
Right.
The pulverize and pave method is probably what we'll spec out to completely, there's some sections that are in pretty bad shape, as you're probably all aware. And so there's a little bit more of an extensive rehab method as opposed to just a grind and cap that we want to do to make sure that it lasts long. And there are some sections, like the intersections, that just need a final cap.
Right. And then it says County Line Road to the freeway, but does that include the roundabout at Fifth Street?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It also includes the roundabout at Calamasa Boulevard that's proposed.
Calamasa Boulevard is the bigger one. Right? Mm-hmm. When's construction expected to start on that?
On Calamasa Boulevard?
Yeah.
Calamasa is taking the lead on that project. They obtained grant funding to initiate the design and construction. So they are kicking off their design, and we're working with them through their right-of-way. So I think we're over a year out from construction. We'll know a little bit more as they get through the design process and we work through that.
And how's the timing on the roundabouts on both sides of the freeway?
That is much longer term. So Calamasa's, that's all in their jurisdiction, and so that's actually a separate project in our CAP. That's that final one on the traffic category there. I'll bring it up on the screen so we can see that. County Line Road, I-10 freeway, PSR, PR. So that is going to be a much longer Caltrans driven process that we're much further along with Wildwood Canyon Road, I-10 freeway interchange. So that's probably closer to 5-10 years out for the construction of those improvements.
You're further along on the Wildwood interchange?
Much further, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're actually in the planning approval and environmental document phase with Caltrans. So later this year, toward the end of the year, our schedule is to release the draft EIR for circulation for the Wildwood Interchange project.
Okay.
And then next summer, we're anticipating to be at the end of that phase when the preferred alternative of the three that are being evaluated will be selected as a result of the phase we're in. So that will lead us into the final phase for our interchange at Wildwood to get it shelf ready for construction.
Okay. Well, the projected completion, last I saw for the Wildwood was 2050.
2030 is what the traffic modeling opening year is shown at with that document, but there's a good chance that construction won't start and be completed by 2030. That was the year that was selected to kind of model the traffic, and then 2050 was that horizon year where they look at the traffic modeling to look at those projections as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I did forget to mention, back to the County Line Road Corridor project, in addition to the other utility and intersection improvements we've talked about, Calamasa is also moving forward with the construction of a storm drain project between 5th Street and the freeway. And so there is a section that we anticipate to be in construction probably later this year for a 72-inch storm drain that kind of leaves from where the Christmas tree lot there is on the corner and the farm stand now, that leaves from that site, goes into County Line Road, and it terminates near the freeway. So that project is another Calamasa utility project, and that should be starting later this year.
So it ties in down by Baker's?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So completion on County Line Road without the roundabouts on either side of the freeway is probably 2.5, 3 years.
I'm hoping that we can get the pavement rehabilitated by the end of this calendar year. That could be delayed with some of the utility work that I've mentioned. So I'd like to say that a significant segment of County Line Road will be rehabilitated and completed by the end of this year. There are some improvements that are close between 5th and the freeway that probably will extend a little bit beyond that window. Okay. And certainly the interchange improvements are 5-10 years out.
Okay. But, well, it's good to hear that Wildwood's projected to be open and running in 5 years?
That is when Caltrans has had us model the traffic. They you have to pick a year to really look at how the different surrounding areas are going to be impacted, the main line and the interchange itself. So that 2030 year isn't like it's going to be open by that year. That's just the projection from like the traffic modeling Caltrans
not
review
construction
process.
start at that point then.
Next summer, we'll kind of end the phase that we're in, and there will be a preferred alternative that will be selected.
Yeah.
That's usually the time when we become a lot more competitive with grants. It's a $130 million project, and if you look in our funding, we've got in the to be determined category $135 million. And so that's another factor in the timing of the construction, whether or not we can secure what we hope will be primarily federal grant money is to be determined. Next summer, once we get the end of this phase, we'll be able to go into developing the construction plans for it and start working through that right-of-way process. Until we get to the end of this phase and work through that, we'll really have a better idea when we can start competing for grants and work through the right-of-way process. And so I can't guarantee that it'll be constructed and in operation by 2030, but that's kind of what our planning environmental documents are modeling for now.
I will add, so Councilmember Woolsey, who's represents Yucaipa on SBCTA, I think either at the last council meeting or the one before, did note that on their prioritization list, they do have that interchange tentatively kind of scheduled for 2030 as well. I think it will come down to, once it's complete with the stage that we're at now, getting kind of the funding and working through those different partnerships to really then set the schedule. The design of the bridge and interchange is also set up to be phased or allow for, some degree of phasing. So that may also relate to the schedule of kind of how that gets built out. And so, is setting the goal and keeping it at least on the prioritization list helps keep it more competitive, which is a good thing. The performance of the bridge in terms of how it reduces traffic on the main line freeway and also how it actually reduces the vehicles miles traveled are two feathers in our cap, so to speak. And so it does help us be a little bit more competitive than probably any other kind of just generic interchange. And so that is kind of our hope. But so we're kind of on there, but the schedule, still a big chunk of money that we can do, and the city doesn't have the pockets to just make it happen tomorrow. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that would be my question. Is there any partnering with Calamasa or Riverside County
on Wildwood interchange?
Yeah. Because they have the most benefit from it long term.
I don't think so. So offhand, I know Riverside County gets a lot of benefit because they have the TUMP fee, so they have their kind of regional transportation fee, which is a pretty hefty fee on development anywhere in Riverside County, but it does create a much larger pool that they can kind of pull from and make some of those projects a lot more feasible. I don't know how their prioritization works, and since we don't have any projects themselves that create a funding source to that TUMP fee, I don't know if they would be able to even allocate funding from Riverside County into San Bernardino County since they're not getting paid money, and I don't know.
Yeah, just the original document on that interchange stated, I don't think it had percentages, but that it was for the regional improvement, and specifically states Calamasa and Riverside County, which of course it does. And I know that on the proposed interchange at Calamasa Boulevard, that Shop Off is putting in something like 75%, 70 or 75% of that, and then the county transportation fee is picking up the majority of that. But to move things along faster, I mean, the documents and the long-term planning of what's going on in Calamasa, they're going to have more benefit out of this interchange in the long term than Yucaipa is. So there's just a curiosity on my side. What are they contributing to it for the?
I do think at a kind of higher level, whether or not the county itself is able to participate kind of through their TUMP fee, or their regional transportation agency, or whether or not maybe support through their federal representation, because of that benefit, where it's kind of, okay, we have our representative that covers kind of Yucaipa and the surrounding communities, and Calamasa is under a different representation, whether or not kind of the combined forces were that, the overall benefit to the region, that may be where we probably get a much greater play. That's kind of outside of the planning wheelhouse and probably more in the, the public information and governmental affairs kind of realm. But definitely I certainly agree that there's a regional benefit to the interchange and how it performs beyond just it helps Yucaipa, for Yucaipa's sake.
Definitely.
It's definitely much broader.
It's definitely long-term more benefit on that side of the freeway than on the Yucaipa side.
And definitely all the commuters are coming from Beaumont and Banning, they're heading out west, in the rush hour, getting that reduction from that kind of, that.
Well, Calamasa's planned development, just the first phase right there, the Shop Off's involved in, is 5 million square foot of warehouse and with 3,150 homes.
Yeah, that sounds all right.
Of course, the warehouse, the way the layout is on it, looks like the warehouses would really utilize that Calamasa Boulevard one, but the houses are closer proximity to the Wildwood interchange, and we're going to benefit the most out of that. So I think there's some opportunity with Shop Off to share some of that cost in Riverside County, but I'm just like to see it move forward faster than.
We'll take money wherever
I'll just give my short version. I was involved. I had a development up in Victorville with an overpass and off ramps. It was supposed to start. Everything was approved. Start construction within 2 years. I built a project based on that, and 15 years later, it was finally finished. So, they take time and they get delayed, and
our focus right now is to complete the phase we're in, make sure we have the funding to complete that next phase, and as we go through that, we will certainly exhaust any and all opportunities for funding, whether that be a federal or state grant. We have our SPCTA partners, and our council member Woolsey is involved with that committee. They're capped at the interchanges in their Valley Freeway interchange phasing program, and we're on their list. They're a funding partner. They're capped at $5 million contribution for now.
Yeah.
But we're going to be looking into and exhausting all efforts to acquire funding to move that project forward.
Oh, I know they're big projects. I just, from my perspective, it's like.
Can I follow up on this just a little bit? Tim and I think were the commissioners that were on that water tour, and we saw the development that I believe would be north of the warehouse. That's not, it went belly up, I guess, but there was a lot of housing that was going to go in there. And so that Wildwood Canyon overpass, as Tony's suggesting, I think is going to help Calamasa. And so I don't know if it's staff or Jennifer at the timing, you're saying we're gonna proceed with what we're doing and then we're gonna look for funding, but seems to me we could be breaking some ground in that area with Calamasa, because I think Tony's suggesting, and I think it's true from what we've seen on that tour, that they're gonna benefit from that. The other thing that came up on that tour was a discussion of, instead of a bridge or an overpass, which is, gonna cost a lot of money, could there be a on-ramp going, I guess you would say, north or west from Wildwood Canyon, from where that would connect to the freeway, an on-ramp, and then as you would go south or east on the 10 past Live Oak, you have a off-ramp there at Wildwood. And I know there's what do you call it, a rest area or something, but you instead of having the overpass cost, you'd have the on-ramp, off-ramp thing.
I can address that. Yeah, that was discussed early on with the FHWA has been heavily involved with our project because it's a new connection to the freeway. So they're not always involved in projects like this with interchanges, but they are required to, and they're an important stakeholder if it's a new connection. And so between them and Caltrans, they've made it clear, although that there can be some construction phasing to facilitate the constructability and to minimize impacts with the existing facilities, that rest area is required to be protected in place. They will not entertain a phased or a partial interchange.
Not a plan A, plan B.
There are some examples we could look at that are partial interchanges with just ramps and no bridges, and they were very clear at the years ago with our initial planning phases that is not allowed. That will not be.
Is that because of the rest area mostly, or
no? That's just they don't want. I think there's probably a lot of reasons behind it.
Okay.
Safety, driver. FHWA and Caltrans. A lot of the process we go through with them is to maintain consistency for drivers and the off ramps and how they're designed and how they look. And it's a very not having a crossing is kind of a policy decision at FHWA and Caltrans. They really want to try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, I think it's the maintaining accessibility through the entire thing. So even an example, Wabash, that off ramp, as an example, would be something that could not be built today because it doesn't provide the on ramp, going as you get off the freeway going on, and it doesn't have the off ramp to get back on. So because of that disconnect, and same with Singleton, it doesn't meet those requirements that they have in place today, where it's like, no, if you're going to get off the freeway, you have to have the full range of access throughout the kind of corridor.
Interesting. Last question, people ask me about Second Street. Is there anything on the connection to Oak Glen on Second?
That street will not extend into the uptown area?
No.
Are you talking about from Oak Glen Road to Yucaipa Boulevard?
Yeah, going north to Oak Glen, right? Second Street?
Second Street, the intersection with Oak Glen Road and Second Street is there. That's the entrance to the community park. So there was a new signal that was installed there. If you go south, it terminates at a cul-de-sac.
Right.
That will be extended as a part of the Wilson 3 Basin project for the access for maintenance. It will not extend and connect up into the neighborhood to the south.
Oh.
Yeah, when the Oakland Creek specific plan, when we were working on that, the community around there was very vocal that was not to ever connect. So.
Eminent domain. Okay.
All right, Brandon?
All right, so mine are more the financials, so just so I'm understanding this right, this whole budget's $193 million.
If you're referring to the slide from previously,
Yep.
this represents over a 20-year period.
Okay.
The capital improvement program investments.
Okay,
Yeah.
and 47% of it is covered by federal grants, state grants, agency partnerships.
Correct.
We're left with the other 53%.
While the other 53% comes from these underfunding sources up top. So yeah, the measure, all the gas tax money that we get has to be used. Yeah, so it's not city funding. They're still outside revenue streams. The only internal revenue stream that we're seeing is that light blue general fund one there. Very minimal part of the funding mix.
And if we approve this tonight, some of this is still subject to shifting, like the Pendleton project, because you said it's gonna come back to us later on.
If you want to look at a specific
Like, I'm just
project.
looking at like the low water crossing for Pendleton.
So I would say the CIP, when it's approved and adopted into the budget, is set. Any changes after that point would require council action. And if we get a new grant, for example, that introduces a new project as a possible project for us to move forward, we would have to come back with an item to introduce that into the CIP, and any financial elements of that with the grant funding, local match. The same applies for a project if it changes. If a project like Pendleton were to change, we were to reprioritize it, or the funding streams coming in were to change, that would come back to city council for a recommendation to amend the CIP.
Okay, because like looking at it, we're on the hook for quite a bit of money for Pendleton if we approve it tonight, correct? Am I reading that correctly?
No.
Okay.
We are completed with the design. We've been reimbursed for the expenditures to date. So we don't have, if you look at that project in particular, there's 16,000 left
Okay.
to spend. And yeah.
And probably what's helpful is in the case of the CIP, in terms of plan commission reviews, you're not committing any financial funds at all because the plan commission doesn't have that authority. You're more or less looking at the project listing themselves of what are the activities that are being proposed. Council's the only one that has authority to make a determination on the budget. So if they go, hey, this project's going to be too much money, let's put it on the back burner, that would be something that they would themselves have the actual kind of full authority to determine. Our kind of role, at least on the plan commission general plan conformity, is okay, Pendleton Road is a street listed in the general plan. It shows a connection here. Okay, having this in the program makes sense because it's in the general plan. And then certainly if it gets kind of deprioritized because of, the shift or, where the funding isn't there, then that certainly kind of where council weighs in and goes like, hey, yeah, it's in it, but of all the things we gotta spend money on, this may not be as an example, the one that we should probably put our aids in our basket because of the cost. Then that's certainly a fair topic, and that is part of, what will get presented to city council as part of that future discussion item.
Yeah, and any changes that happen throughout the fiscal year, they come back to this same meeting each year. And so planning commission's role is kind of exclusively, are any of those changes, or in this case tonight, the 3 new projects, are they in conformance with the general plan? That's really,
Okay.
so any of those changes that you're kind of looking toward, those would be incorporated into the CIP the following year.
Okay. Answered my questions.
All right, Dennis?
And just so everybody knows, I actually met with staff a couple of days ago on this and went through it in depth, probably for about an hour and 45 minutes. We have a couple items in there. I believe you stated, Landon, that the EV charging thing is going back to the council and whether or not they're going to look at that.
Well, we actually, on that project, let me just so everybody can see. Oops, not too far there. That project, if you're looking at it in the CIP, we have applied for a grant to reevaluate the possibility to design and construct some charging stations at public facilities. So that project's paused. There's no recommended changes to the CIP at this time, but we'll be returning to council with direction on how to proceed with that as we get feedback from our grant application.
Okay. The bigger item that's been discussed here quite a bit tonight is the Pendleton low water crossing. I gave staff my opinion of that, and my opinion of that project needs to be scratched. And the reason why it needs to be scratched, most of that area is developed up there already. There's a few large parcels in there, but only a few. There's I believe the Gore project up there has, 15 lots going to be developed, something like that?
That sounds
15,
about
18
right.
lots. I believe there's a Schaffel has 15, 20 acres in there. That's all zoned half-acre zoning in there. Other than that, it's pretty much developed out. And I believe there was an estimate of about $10.5 million to build that box culvert and extend that road through there. The traffic standards or traffic flow in that area is we're not lining up 10 cars at an intersection up there. And to spend that kind of money to extend a road that the city owns both sides of it, I think are not feasible, not based on financial, but based on really necessary that it needs to be constructed. With that, I would look at and give recommendation to the council and that they look at abandoning that road and creating a cul-de-sac there on Pendleton from Highland Avenue, create a cul-de-sac there and then gate off on Oakland Road where Pendleton comes in Oakland Road. The way it ties in there right now, it's very dangerous. I know they were looking at a realignment to come up there to enter Pendleton there next to the home that's on top of the hill there. I don't think that landowner next door wants a intersection or a corner next to his house. And as Landon stated that even Caltrans, that apparently they're a little hesitant on funding typically 95% of it, that they're a long ways away from that as well. I look at this as being sort of that bridge in Alaska going to nowhere. And I don't see where that Pendleton Road ties into the flow from the Wine Country Alliance area up there because people are going to be using Oakland Road. I don't see them come across Pendleton. If they did, I don't think the people would be real excited on Date Street because that will be the next arterial to head down to Bryant Street and that flow of traffic. So, in my opinion, and I believe we can only make a recommendation here on this, is that we ask the council to relook at that project, and in my opinion is that project needs to be scrapped. They can gate it and abandon it in its entirely. That section of land there that they're talking about extending that through there or rebuilding that, the city owns both sides of that property. So it's not like it's going to be tied into some other private property. It serves no purpose.
I disagree with that because it's another form of egress if there's an emergency coming out from, Oak Glen. It's another form of egress for people to escape from that area if there's another catastrophic event. And I live in that area, and I think it's actually a good project. That's just my opinion.
Well, I guess we can disagree there. I think if you take a look at the map, and I think there could be a traffic study based on that if there was a closure. If there's any catastrophic things on Oakland Road, okay, at that point they would be using Casablanca. Casablanca has a bridge there already that travels over to Highland Avenue, down to Pendleton, down to Date, and works its way through there. Pendleton doesn't really make much change to that, if any at all. And that's my, that's my 63 years of living in Yucaipa, and I've actually grew up living right on the corner of Highland and Casablanca. I live on Oakland Road right now. I live just down the street from there. I have traveled that section many a times, okay? And it is dangerous the way it is now, but I don't see by constructing it that it adds that much benefit for the cost in that. And I'll stand on that, and that's why I would like to see council and to take a better look at that, and maybe staff recommendation or to look at that flow of traffic flow there. If it was abandoned, is it going to make any traffic problems? And second arterial to ingress and egress into that area, because I don't think it does.
If I may respond, appreciate your concerns, understand your feedback, and we will certainly consider that in our process. With respect to the item tonight, there are no changes proposed with Pendleton project, and so the recommendation before you really doesn't allow us to really change any kind of project or the prioritization. That doesn't mean we can't, as a staff, kind of continue to work with City Council on that prioritization throughout the year as we work through the design process. And there are a lot of different factors to consider as we evaluate that. So I think tonight, the recommendation is really more specific to Pendleton Road is in the general plan. It's a street. The connectivity to Oakland Road is there. So any change to that would actually be out of conformance with the general plan. So with tonight's recommendation specifically, that's really more the focus. I appreciate your feedback and your concerns, and we certainly welcome that, and we will consider what you've said as well as other statements with a variety of projects as we go through each of these different projects and the phases and move forward. So just kind of speaking specifically to, the action before us tonight and our kind of limitation with our role with conformance with the general plan to that respect. So,
and I would probably add, as the direction or as staff seeks direction from council on that particular project, especially in light of the current funding gap with Caltrans on the current design, I think that will be kind of the vessel where we can bring up that comment, and as part of council's consideration of the broad range of options, that could be one end of the spectrum to another one, and certainly they'll be the ones that will give us kind of the final.
Yeah, and without, I don't want to get too specific with each project. I know we've had some good discussions and really more with the intention to just clarify the goals and some of the objectives and benefits of the project. Projects like this also have a connection to different drainage facilities. There's a drainage component with this. Our chief of the fire department at one of the last council meetings updated council on a grant that we applied for. We partnered with them for some potential benefits we could do down in where the crossing is now, a much lower scale, a much smaller scale project there that would still address some of the concerns that we've had with access and the condition of the road, and that some of the impacts from the fire and the drainage. So there are a lot of different components to this project that we're kind of we're hoping to hear back in the number of weeks and maybe months on if we get awarded another grant that we would need to come back to council with and introduce that for some improvement. So without getting too specific into the weeds on that project in particular, there's some other things that are in motion that we also consider when we come back, like Ben said, to City Council with an update on the project, opportunities for looking at different ways to potentially achieve some of the same benefits and still maintain conformance with the general plan. So it's a kind of a complex path forward, but in that process, we certainly will consider some of your observations that were pointed out tonight.
Okay, so that will be passed on. So what I'm reading between the lines, what you're telling me there, if the general plan was altered or a change with that would be the place to do that.
If I would say if council hypothetically goes in reviewing the options, we shouldn't do a connection that it should be abandoned. The subsequent action from that direction would be to amend the general plan circulation element to then remove that road, so that it's not shown as a arterial or collector street in its thing. So right now it shows it as a main kind of point of connection, and so we would have to update that specific exhibit so that it is not shown. So then that way that direction and the future outcome of that road coincides with what the general plan map shows as well.
Right, that's a collector in the general plan right now.
Okay.
Since we've had a discussion on this, I didn't know this was going to be brought here tonight. So I respect Commissioner Miller and his thinking. I also respect Stacy and her response, and I live on Cherrycroft, as you know. And talking with various people, I think there's a plan that maybe there's going to be a light eventually up there on Oak Glen Road, just, east of Cherrycroft, around the Pendleton area. They're already coming, westbound on Oak Glen, down towards Cherrycroft and Fremont at a pretty rapid rate that can become a safety issue with people coming off Cherrycroft or off of Douglas or Fremont or whatever. Not Douglas, but whatever the streets are. So if Commissioner Miller wants to have a strong opinion on this, my opinion is don't say the Planning Commission is saying this. I would much rather have a discussion with these 6 people on this rather than do this here in front of everybody and see if we can come to some kind of conclusion that the Planning Commission says to council or whatever. But like you say, that's not why we're here tonight, but because this came up, I feel like I need to say something. I think the egress in types of an emergency, and just from a time standpoint, I hate going down to Bryant because of the lights and the traffic and everything, and I'd love to take that Pendleton, but the wash, if cars aren't lined up, that's the reason. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, Tim? No? All right.
I have so many questions. Where do I begin? No, I really don't. As it pertains to your capital improvement projects, to the general plan, how it correlates, I have no questions. I think you've answered everything, any question that I've ever had. A lot of good stuff on here, trust me. I was going through here, looking through it over the weekend. I kind of was familiar with a lot of the projects, but having you explain it and even hearing some of my peers explain some of the projects just really signifies that there's a lot of good happening in Yucaipa. So thank you.
One thing I do want to add as well, so the format of the CIP has kind of changed. So we have, with our budget, kind of gone to a more digital system. And so over the next few years, you're going to see a lot of the capital improvement projects, also the information go into that digital system. And so you'll have a lot more detail of the project, the location, details about that project, and it will connect to the different funding sources in the budget as well. And so it will become, at the end of the day, a much more kind of interactive thing. So anyone from the public, as well as commissioners and anyone that's interested, will be able to have a really good, one-stop source of, what's this project the city's doing, how does it interrelate to the different funds, different sources, the budget, and what's going on, and really kind of piece together that. And so, we're kind of at the early onset, and so, Public Works and Engineering will be kind of taking the lead, and we'll be helping out in ways that we can. But really, as part of just our overall trend towards more accessible information and transparency, and making information a lot more easy for our residents and interested parties, it'll be something fun. So we're excited to see that evolution of this information in the next couple of years as well for you guys, and make it easier to understand. So
Excellent. Yeah, Ben, thank you for bringing that up. The digital budget book that will be available after the budget's adopted online from our webpage, we'll have a link, and you'll be able to go, and each of these projects that are on the CIP will have its own page where you can see more information about it, the funding, some of the project benefits, the location. So yeah, we're excited to make our CIP a little bit more accessible each year, and kind of work on that each year to keep improving on that.
Is that part of your new software program that you guys just implemented?
So
like planning and submittals and
so it's not tied to that particular software. This will be through our budget software, but there is a lot of we're trying to leverage a lot of our technology that we have in different sources and use them, so where one maybe has some limits, using another source to build it up. And so we're trying to really play to the strengths of each one. And so
they're not tied together.
No.
Nope.
All right, any other commissioners have any other comments? All right, with that, I would like to move to adopt the findings as contained in the agenda report for the draft 7-year CIP program. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, with that, it passes. Any announcements from staff?
Our next commission meeting will be June 18th, and so there'll be a few different items on that one. So we're excited for that. And other than that, hope everyone has a nice long holiday to start off the summer kind of season. And want to again congratulate our chair for her recent marriage and new name change and everything. So as always, just happy for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, with that, at 8:10, we are adjourned.